Any questions, comments, concerns, sufferings, grievances?
Oh my God, my computer is running so slow. Like I can't even navigate around in the scene. Every time I like add a texture or something, it gets like even more and more bogged down. But it's a lot of fun. I'm really enjoying doing this.
That's good. Hope you're having
Well,
fun.
I probably well, I did answer I did answer my I actually already did answer my questions on the discussion. And well, at first I thought nobody actually replied, but 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 thankfully they did.
Wonderful, wonderful. I guess if no one has any questions, I will go into the rigmarole. Um, let's see.
I do have questions, but I think that they can wait maybe.
Um, I mean, you could ask them now.
So okay, so I just want to make sure that I'm following the guidelines for the assignment. Um, Let me find it. It says to use five. Can there be more than five? Um, I don't have it right in front of me. So I know what I'm saying. Five texture maps. Can there be more than five texture maps? Or
Yeah, you said it says at least, or no?
yeah,
Yeah, at least
yeah.
means just at least five.
Okay. And for one procedural texture, there could be more than one.
Yeah, you just have to. The requirement is just one.
Okay. All right. Cool.
I'm trying to. When I, anytime I listen to people on this computer, on my desktop computer, particularly in Zoom, everybody sounds really low, and it's not you all, it's my computer. So we're just trying to figure it out.
Is it coming from me? You think? Is it like a lot of
No, it's
background
not.
noise?
It's not anybody. It's my computer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Hold on. Let me this person.
Yeah, it sounds like I'm listening to it like on a World War II transmitter radio or something.
Did that just start happening?
No, I think it does come from yours, but then when I listen back to it, like on the recordings, it's not there.
Okay, because I just turned off. I just tried to turn off auto or like what did I just do? I turned off something. Well, I just changed the echo cancellation. Just trying to see if I could. I need to look into. This is like the first desktop I've had in like 20 years. I'm just like, it gives me the blues. Like, luckily during this class, knock on wood, it hasn't shut down. I've done like some presentations where, or yeah, it did do that one time in class. But like, I'm just like, I thought desktops are supposed to be powerful, but we'll figure it out, or I will at least. Let me share my screen.
Did you build it yourself, components, or
No, I just was telling my boss yesterday on Tuesday. I was like, I don't want to waste money messing up. Like, I fully believe I'm capable of building a computer, but no, I just let them do it. And if I had like somebody, like a
Um,
friend that walked me through step by step, yeah. And I mean, I fully believe I'm capable of doing the research. I just don't want to. I paid the convenience fee of like not doing it myself. All right, so this week, let me see. So just let me just some reminders. Please remember that you will not have access to this course after the semester is over. Don't know why they do that. I can't answer questions about that. But if you want any resources from the modules, make sure you're like copying and pasting them before next Friday. Um, no, I do not have a PDF file already done of the content because I update and try to improve the content every semester. So any PDF that I would have created would be outdated by now. Uh, please remember that this assignment is due, the texturing assignment is due on Sunday, and then the lighting rendering assignment is due next Wednesday. Um, if you need any extra time for anything, you need to be discussing that with me soon. Please message me on Canvas rather than an email because I might not see your email to the end of after the semester is over. I see Canvas messages much quicker. And just like for you all, you can send the if you need to send the Blender file. Canvas does accept attachments. So,
Yes, I
also,
finally
hold
doing
on. Let me finish.
texturing.
But also know that you cannot turn in anything after next Friday. I have to turn in final grades by next Friday, which is why the last assignment is due on Wednesday because that gives me enough time to grade all your assignments before the end of the semester. Orkan, do you have a question?
Oh yeah. So we're doing texturing now.
Yeah, yeah. Have you looked at the module yet?
Well, yeah, I saw them.
Yep. So you should be downloading the game room to texture it for the assignment. So yes, the assignment this week is about materials and texturing. The purpose of this assignment is to apply materials and textures to objects. You'll also be using basic UV mapping techniques to place some textures. So let me see if I go back to so as you can see, the requirements are materials and textures on all of the objects. What the 5 texture maps requirement is that there are only 5 that require UV mapping to be used. So you can use as many textures as you want, but 5 have to be used. You have to be able to you have to change the UVs to is a requirement for that, and I'll be showing that in the demonstration. Because you have to add a comment listing the 5 UV mapped texture maps, the procedural texture you used, and which one, and then the complex material you used and which complex material, like mostly what object did you use it on. Like for example, if you can see, let's see if I can open this. Let's pretend if you have bad eyes that you can see this, but but there's these 3 posters on this back wall. Sometimes when people list the 5 things in the comments, they list the posters as one thing. Each poster is a thing because it's not one entity. It's not like posters. It's like if you used UV mapping for each poster, that's 3. That's not 1.
Okay, so for like the sofas, is it 3 for like one for each cushion and then one for the frame? That would be
Your
3.
sofa is most likely, as you're going to see in the demonstration, your sofa is most likely not going to be one that is included in this requirement.
Okay, so that would count as 3, like unwrapping the bottom cushion, unwrapping the back cushion, unwrapping
No, what I'm saying is, if once you see the demonstration, the sofa will most likely not be what you use to do this.
Okay.
But you'll see in the demonstration. But just
So-
make sure like it's each individual object is because sometimes people like will list like 12. Also, don't list more than I ask. It's not like you don't get extra points for listing more things. Just list the 5 texture maps. If you used 6, then there's just 6 that you used, but I just need to know which 5 so I can grade it. And then if you used 12 procedural textures, I only need to know 1 of them. If you used 3 complex materials, I only need to know 1 of them. You don't get any extra points for listing more than is required. For the complex material, as you can see, I list a bunch of examples right here. So this, your complex material, just encourages your own research, where you might find a tutorial on how to do rubber or like aluminum or something, and you just kind of are pushing around some settings and maybe adding extra nodes. But that's what makes it complex, is that it's not just you opened one of the materials available in the program and then submitted it. That's not complex.
I guess this is easy.
And then, as I mentioned in the announcement, like, please don't submit a version of this assignment with lighting. If you do both assignments at the same time, again, that's fine. But this assignment only requires texturing, please. If you do the assignment at the same time, just save the other one as lighting and turn it in for next week's assignment. Also, make sure that your Blender file is a packed Blender file, because if you don't pack it properly, I won't be able to see any of your textures, and that will affect your grade. And you should be reading the rubric each week, but as you can see on the rubric, there is no slot for the image, because you don't have to render an image this week, so you only have to turn in a Blender file this week. Any questions about any of that?
I think that's easy. Well, now I know what that I should. So I guess we shouldn't be submitting the image this week. So I guess we're not going to be. Okay.
All right. So I'll just some of this is in the videos for the instruction, but I'll also do this demonstration here as well. Oops, shit. All right. So one thing you'll have to do is add materials. Hopefully people have been working on their assignment for today. To add a material, as you probably already figured out, I'm in solid mode right now, so solid mode doesn't show materials. So if you're going to want to view your materials, in the top right of the viewport, there's the ball right next to the solid view, which is the material preview. So this is how you're going to be able to see your materials accurately. And then down here at the bottom on this kind of ledge right here, we have the checkered ball that is red and a dark gray. This is your material tab. The default cube always has a material on it already, but when you create new materials, you have to create, when you create new objects, you have to create new materials. So with the default cube, we can just change the material, but in order to add the material, I'm going to select my object. On the material tab, I'm going to click new, and I can, it's always good, just like it's always good to name your objects, it's always good to name your materials, because you want to be able to recognize them very easily, and also if you need to apply the material to something else, it'll be easier if you know what the material name is. So what I did was, next to base color, I just clicked this box and it brings up my RGB wheel. If ever, it just looks all black and you're like trying to move it around and it's not changing, you just have to move this slider all the way to the right, the tint and shadow slider. You just move that all the way up and then you can see the colors again. So I just can move it up or down wherever I want it to be. You can use, if you have any hexadecimals if you have like you go to Adobe Color or Coolors. I think that's the website, like something that gives you color palettes or something. You can put hexadecimals in here at the bottom. If you have RGB codes, you can use that or just do the HSV. So, like, just similar to any other art program, they do have multiple ways for you to change the color.
So what about the creating the realistic textures?
We're gonna go through that. You can, if you just get to the, if you get to the end of my demonstration, you'll see a lot of what you're gonna ask.
Okay.
Let's see. So if you want to add a material to part of your object, all you have to do is select your object, go into edit mode, and then you're most likely going to select faces. I'm going to, and you can select whatever faces you want. If you want to shift select random faces, you can do that. I'm going to select this face and then double click on the edge to do my edge loop. And what I will do over here on the right in the material area, I'm going to press the plus sign. That creates my new material. I'm going to press new, and I'm going to name my material. And then next to base color, I'm going to click my color bar and change my material. And as you can see, it hasn't done anything yet because right here we have to press assign. So press assign, and then you have your new color. So that's how you add, like, you always want to have a base color that you have, and then when you start adding additional colors, then that's when you can add it to the face. You can also add multiple. So like if I just click here and go into edit mode, and I just select this, I can do another material by clicking the plus sign, press new. Change that to blue. You can also change the name of it here. Like you could double click it, or you could change it in this dialog box or this text box. And then I just press assign, and so you can add as many colors as you want. The way you can copy materials on other objects, because I'll give a story. When I worked in Korea on Family Guy and Cleveland Show, like on my team, there was only two 3D modelers, me and my coworker Jiyoung, and sometimes when I would get his, we would reuse models. This goes into the importance of naming your materials and stuff like that. Like sometimes I would get his file that he already created. Like I had to create for an episode of Family Guy. Brian got into an accident with his car, and so we obviously already had Brian's car from other episodes, but I just had to create a crushed version of it. I received the file, and then when I went to the materials, it was like, Brian's car is like a very light gray. There was like 52 grays because it was like an individual material applied to each part of the car. And so typically when I would get his files, I would consolidate all the materials first, because sometimes we would have to, like all the cars in Family Guy and Cleveland Show are done in 3D, so sometimes we would have to just change the car a little bit if it was like a car in the background, and so I would be changing maybe it from purple to blue, a blue car. And so having all those materials, I didn't want to change all of them at the same time, so I would just like consolidate them. So this is what I'm going to show you. Like, you don't have to create multiple reds. All you have to do is kind of go to this other object, and then next to new, there's this drop down, and there's the color red, and you can just apply that red right there. If you want to apply the entire thing, what you can do is, okay, well, what I'll say first. If you have like that one color and you want to apply it to like multiple objects, you first select all of the objects you want to transfer to. You select all of those first, and then you select the object you want to transfer the material from. Then you do Control L, and if you do link materials, it will transfer the red color, which is the base color. It doesn't, link materials doesn't transfer the face colors, but there is a way to transfer the face colors. So, and this most likely won't work for the cube, so I'm not going to select that. So I'm going to just select the objects that have the same makeup and topology as the object I'm transferring the materials from. So I'm selecting the ones I want to transfer to first, and then select the object I want to transfer from. When I do Control L, instead of link materials, you just link object data, and then it'll transfer all of the specificity that you've done in the materials. So if, like, as you can see,
Can I ask a question about that?
yeah.
Well, I didn't understand this when I was watching the videos. I'm still not sure I do.
Mhm.
How is linking materials different than just you create your materials library and you just apply the materials to the things you want? I guess I don't know. Why would I link? Is it like if I had 6 wooden chairs?
Yeah, like if I did, if, let's see, oops. Let's do, I'm just going to delete by pressing the minus sign. Oops. Minus. Okay. So if you had all this, would you rather do it one by one, or would you rather have an easier way to do it?
So I can't just select all those, click on the material, and say assign. Doesn't allow me to do that.
Nope.
I can't click on the assign button. It's not there.
I went to the drop down and did red, and it only assigned it to the last one.
Oh, okay.
But also, if you have this, it's not gonna do all the specificity. So.
Okay, I think I understand. Thank you.
So so we're gonna download the image and use this to make something in reference.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Let's see. Hold on. Let me do this. So I'm trying to teach you how to break a link. Let's see. Shift. And then this one. And then Control L. Materials. Oh. Okay, so as you can tell, right here in the material section, if you look at this number, this is how many objects have this material. Now, if I was to select one of my objects and say, like, I have a bunch of like bubbles or a bunch of basketball or whatever I have, and I just need one of them to actually be different because, like, my client or my director is like, okay, I actually want this one to be different. You can break, and it could just be slightly different. So I can have the same red, but maybe I want to add another color to the faces or something like that. I select the object, and then I think if I click this number, yes. If I click the number, as you can see, all of these have red on it, but this one has red 001. So if I end up changing this, it'll be the only thing that's changed. But if I was to change this red, it changes all of those. So sometimes I don't want to do that. And so if I need, can it do multiple? Let's see if I click these. Red. No, it only do those one at a time. Oh wait, did it do any of them? Which one did it do? Red 002. Let me see. Go to what? Oh, I'm trying to go here. Blender file, materials, red 002, and then I want to select linked. Okay, it changed that one. Alright, it changed these two. So if I'm ever confused about like which material is on what I did originally, it was on view layer, so you could see all your objects. But in the upper right of the outliner, or upper left, sorry, of the outliner, this it looks like a bunch of JPEG images on top of each other. I changed that from view layer to Blender file, and then under materials, it lists like all your materials. And then say I select all of these, right click, select link. This is actually how I use in grading. I check if you have materials on all your objects. I'll like go in here, select link, and then I do select invert, and then I can see which objects don't have a material. If it's just like a couple like objects in the corner or something like that, I don't like mark you down for that. But that's how I grade it. That's how I check to grade it. Let's see. Do I want to? I think that's it for that part. Any questions about that?
Well, I think I actually saw that tutorial that you sent me that of how this works, mainly with the company and stuff.
Yeah, that's the point. Gotta look at all the tutorials. So next, let's see. For the procedural, so go back. I actually don't know which page this is on. Next page. On the next. Okay, yes. So on this image right here, this lists out all the procedural textures. So you don't have to guess which textures are the procedural textures. As you can see, also, some of these are grayed out. The ones that are grayed out are not procedural textures. So only the ones in white text are the procedural textures. if I go to so before we were changing the color bar, if I click the yellow dot next to base color, this is the screenshot that's on your module page. I could choose one of these, checker, and because these two are linked, they both changed. I can change the colors and the scale. You can play around with all that and all of these settings. I do want to show you how to use the brick texture, because no matter how much you play around with this, it's never going to do what you want without like this process. So I have my cube selected. I'm going to go to the yellow dot, go to the brick texture. It shows up properly on the top. If you kind of look at it,
No
and
way.
you know what you're looking at, it's like if you look at it from the top, it's a projection going down. So it just kind of continues on to the bottom. So this part is black, so it's black, and then so that's how it's kind of manifesting on this cube. Like you could change the offset for if you want like just bricks on top, stacked on top, or offset bricks. The frequency. Oops.
So I guess now I know how I can texture real objects.
Mm-hmm. The squash. You can squash, I guess, one of them. And there's 3. I changed them. I can do. If I want to do like a brick, or more of a brick color, and change that up. Change that to like a brown color. So that's what you can do with that. And there's all these other settings right here. None of these settings fix how it's being projected. So first, you should already have this enabled theoretically by now, I think, possibly. But if you don't, it's fine. We're going to go to Edit, Preferences. And on the add-ons, I type in the word node, N-O-D-E. And the node wrangler is right here. Just gotta make sure the node wrangler is enabled. And I can close that out. And then I can go to shading. As you can see, by default, they have this orange outline, like all of these are selected at the same time. You do not want to use the node wrangler with all these just selected at the same time. So you're just gonna click off and just select the node that you want. So I only need the brick texture to have these additional settings on it. So I'm going to select the brick texture, and then you press Control T, and it adds this mapping node and texture node. So basically, people used to do this manually before, and then somebody created the node wrangler, and now you can just enable it, and it does it for you. Now this helps you change how it looks. What we are going to do is for the what we're going to change is for the texture coordinate node, we're going to actually click on the UV node and put that into the vector as opposed to the generated. So change that, and now it'll act correctly. So again, this originally was generated to vector, but I changed it for UV to that vector. And all you gotta do is click and drag. So that's how you can get your brick texture, if you're ever going to use it, properly set up. So you can also take it a step further, and if I was to go back into the layout and tab into edit mode. I have all of the faces selected. I can go to UV, unwrap, cube projection, and so when you actually UV something, which is, I'll go into that later too, it can show up a little bit better on your objects. But I'll explain UVing in a second. So, yeah, let's kind of go into them. I feel like I have some already set up stuff. Demos. Okay, we can do UV textures. Okay, let's do that one and that. Okay, let me go. So just for using textures in general, let's just do a new thing, and I'm going to do Shift A, create a UV sphere. Shift A. I would go to Edit, Preferences, and Extra. I'm going to turn on my extra objects, and then Shift A, Mesh, and I want a round cube. And oh wait, hold on, let me, before I do that, let me hide this cube. Shift A, round cube, and I want to change the radius so that it actually looks like a sphere. And I haven't done this. So rock generator, one rock. Oh, is this gonna look? I don't know. I haven't used this before, so I'm just gonna kind of leave it alone. I don't know what it's gonna do. Okay, I'll just leave that alone because I've never used it. So for using textures, I have my cube. I can go next to base color. I'm going to click the yellow dot again, and you just go to the second column and image texture, and then you just press open, and then you go look for your texture. Now I'm just going to put this rock texture, and I'm going to make sure to put my material preview on, and then I'm going to apply the rock texture. Rock texture.
It looks like the boulder from Thomas.
And then I'm just going to apply this to different things. So, as we can see, if I go to, at the top, I'm going to go to UV editing. If I tab into edit mode, this is how we can see how our texture is being applied. So UV texturing, as you can see on the module, it's like when you have your chocolate, or if you ever had to in elementary school or something, you had to do the assignment where you had to kind of create, this cross type thing, and then you had to fold it and tape it or glue it into a cube in maybe math class or something. That's the concept. The concept is that you have this complex shape, and you have to, particularly for old school texturing, because now you could just kind of use Substance Painter, or you can use the texture painting in Blender. Don't use texture painting for this assignment, please. Thanks. But you kind of flatten it into one piece. It doesn't have to be a square piece, but you kind of flatten it and then you take it into Photoshop and paint it, and then you bring it back in. That's like the old school way to do it. So we can see we have this entire like rock texture right here, but it's only being used partially by the cube. And if we go to this, the reason I have the UV sphere is because this has poles at the top, and then the cube sphere doesn't. And so, as we can see, when we kind of zoom into the top, it starts swirling because of how it's UV'd. So it has like the natural UVs just have like all of these triangles at the top. So it's kind of skipping these sections, so it's not going to be all together. And you're not required to do any complex UVs for this texturing assignment. I'm just showing you as a part of learning. You don't have to actually apply this. Feel free to do the most simplest UVing ever in life for this assignment. If I go to UV unwrap and then sphere projection, you can see how that changes, and it kind of gives you less seams, but there's still seams somewhere, because if we select all, wherever this stops, let's see, if we do in the top left, if we do the UV sync, which is these two arrows, I can select in the UV and it'll select over here. So as we can see with how this is shaped, it kind of looks crazy and swirly over here. If we select this section, where's that at? So that's where it looks swirly over here. So that's why people try to use like seamless textures, or in like the old school way, you would have this rock texture and then you might have to try to like copy it. You might do some texture painting or something to fix these areas. So there's like a bunch of ways you can fix that. Go to this one. I think this just doesn't have any UVs, and that's why it's not showing up. And so we will do UV unwrap, and we can either do the spherical, let's just start with spherical, or let me do the smart UV. And so I'm just going to keep everything as default unwrap. And so that actually splits it up into multiple different sections. If we were to put our subdivision surface modifier on here, we could see how that wouldn't be ideal to do. Split it up into like multiple sections. And that's actually supposed to be a smart UV, and that's not smart at all, but hey.
So if you had a rock texture like granite or sandstone that definitely has like, those sedimentary lines to it, this kind of mapping, it seems like, might not give you the results you're going to want.
Yeah, that's why typically people hide seams. Like you're never, I mean, obviously, well, no, you're never going to see all sides of a rock. So you could hide your seams where it's not seen. If you're like, if it's like a video game, you're hiding it probably on the bottom. If it's like a scene in a film, you're going to only see the rock from one side, so you hide your seam on the other side.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Let's do a UV sphere projection.
Does it also happen in simulation games?
Yep, that's a game. So.
Yep, it's because I've actually played Train Simulator, well, trains, and you see these, and I noticed there were a lot of assets that were made. They look anyway, and looked like they were actually made in German. They look like they were actually made by RN. Right.
Interesting. Why is it so bumpy? That's interesting. Let's see. looks like what? It looks like you have like a bevel on it. I wonder. Let's see. If I was just to do it the good old-fashioned way, Shift D, Y. Have an edit mode. Select all. Right-click. Subdivide. And let's subdivide that this many times. And then if I add a subdivision modifier to that. Oh wait, I was supposed to. I wasn't supposed to do that. I was supposed to subdivide. I was supposed to add it here, and then do that, and then I was supposed to apply it. And that is how you do that. That's the traditional way to create your all quad cube. And then if I added a subdivision surface modifier to that, that would act way more normal than this one adding the subdivision. I wonder what is the calculations for the round cube that it's doing this, but this is definitely like somewhat of a solution.
I have a question. I got started with the assignment, and after adding textures to just a few of the objects in the scene, my blend file is 137 megabytes. Is that going to be an issue for submitting it for grading?
Nope, it hasn't been an issue for any previous class.
Okay.
Oh, also, I want to do, let's see, file. No, so this is what the concept of like when you're very purposefully using UV texturing, like obviously for the rock texture, you kind of can smudge it and stuff, but there's specific reasons you'll be using like the UVing. So if I go to the base color, image texture, open, if I brought in a piece of, let's bring in the Rubik's Cube first. If I bring in the Rubik's Cube, it's almost going to be where I need it to be because I did that on purpose. Because it's in a cross like the Rubik's Cube, and all I would have to do is kind of move some points around. You already know from week 2 how to move points around, so I just select this and move this. Let's make sure we can see this in real time. So I can
Well, yep.
over.
Yeah, that's what I meant by that. It's
And
almost if they were.
over.
A lot of the assets I noticed in trains were actually German translated.
Might be a German company. And then I'll move this over. And it's good enough for me. But also, if I were to create a new cube, and then obviously my default cube already has a material on it, but any new cube or any new object, I have to create one. Let's see, we could just change this to be descriptive, Rubik's Cube. And then this one, dice. Sometimes, like, through the years, I've, like, added matte or text to something just to differentiate it. Like, that was more like in Maya where, you know, you're like, if you just have a large list, you know the difference between the objects and the materials or whatever. But you can create your own workflow as you get, create your own projects and stuff. Let's do this, guys. So if we tab into edit mode, as we can see, we have a cross that's to the side and then the cross that's up and down for how our cube is already UV'd. All I have to do is select all of my UVs, and then I can do R90 to rotate it 90 degrees. I can move it down, and perfectionists in the room. And that's about it. So this is what I mean in the requirements of the assignment, where I say 5 objects where you have to use UV texturing to lay it out properly. So that's going to be multiple objects. That's not usually going to be your sofa. If we open, this,
So
this.
is it like we could just like make them like assets in
What does your question mean? What do you mean?
I guess I could try that.
Make what assets? Oh, okay. So typically what people choose, we have like 3 posters, we have a desktop screen, we have a TV, we have books on the shelves and on the tables, we have a mouse pad. So there's like plenty of options where, I mean, even if you want to use this thing, there's plenty of options for like actual objects where you can't just slap a texture on there and call it a day. You have to like lay it out. So that's what that requirement means. So for this one, I would, let's view, frame selected. So for this, I would add my base material first, then add a texture. So my base material, and as you can see, a lot of these objects already have a material on it. So all you got to do is just kind of click new. And if you, for example, for this one, if you don't need both of these and you just want to make it one color, you just press the minus and delete one of them. So this is gonna be like a green, and I'm gonna change this to somewhere in this region. And then I tap into edit mode, go to face. I'm gonna select face. Select these. Plus sign, new. And this is just gonna be white. And assign so that I have my white pages. And then for the top, I'm going to select this face, add new cover, and then go to my yellow dot, image texture, open, and choose my book cover. And then I can go to the UVs, do my, let's see. Oh, wait, I didn't do a sign. Let's do a sign, okay. And make sure I got that. And so, wait, I just want the face. Okay, so this is just kind of in the way. Let me do select, invert. Oh, I don't want this on right now because I'm just going to select movies. Let me try L. If I go to face and press, and just hover over here and press L, it'll select an island of stuff. And then I can just move this over out of the way because I don't need it because this already has a material on it, so it doesn't need to be kind of dealt with. This material, I will do what I did before. I'll go to vertex. I'll just move this over here. And so this is, again, the 5 texture requirement is specifically stuff where you have to move the UVs for it to behave correctly. it's not. It's so don't list something where you just threw a texture on there, or use the node wrangler to like set it. It has to be something where it has to look a certain way for the UVs. So this is my book. And you can do that for multiple different areas. Again, no lights this week. You don't need to render an image this week. Any questions?
So do we have to make a set and create
No,
textures?
this is available for you to download.
Oh, okay.
Any other preguntas? Oh my gosh, we're like ending before the class is over. I'm not like going over time. That's crazy. If you have any questions for me, please hit me up on Canvas. Sorry to the people who I responded to late on email. If you have any questions about turning things in and when you do that, please ask me that asexually, because next Friday is too late and you'll just be getting the grade you get on next Friday. I can't extend it past the end of the semester.
Well, I actually do have a question, and well, one last question.
Mhm.
When is the assignment again?
It's due like so on every assignment it has the date that it's due right here. If you look at the module, it tells you it's due October 5th.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And our next, can you hear me?
A little. Can you speak louder?
Our next Zoom is when?
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
I'll send out an announcement for that. Since the end of the semester is Friday and then the assignments due Wednesday, I want to move the last week's one till Tuesday. I would do Monday, but I can't. I have something else. So sorry. But yeah. All right. See you in the inbox or next week.
Thank you very much.
Thank
All
you.
right.
You're welcome
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.